Since 2015, Pop Health Podcast has brought to you some of the best minds in healthcare, including leaders from government, not-for-profit, and investor-backed powerhouses, as they share successes, failures, and how our audience can move forward in today's constantly evolving healthcare world. Thank you for joining us for today's episode presented by 24 Hour Home Care.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. I'm Gavin Ward, host of Pop Health Podcast. In today's episode, I had the privilege of sitting down with Chrisina Mills, who serves as the Executive Director for the California Association of Area Agencies on Aging, also known as C4A. Chrisina has an awesome story, and she's going to share about her upbringing, where she was born with a disability and how that impacted her life and her career. She is now a pillar in the disability community here in California and has a wealth of information. But again, her story is very inspirational. Today, we learn about her story and her impact in the disability and aging community. And we learn a little bit more about C4A, the California Association of Area Agencies on Aging, and their upcoming conference. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to check us out on other episodes of Pop Health Podcast by visiting us at pophealthpodcast.com, checking us out on our YouTube channel, or visiting us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy today's episode. Chrisina, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you, Gavin.
Yeah, great to see you as well, folks. I got to get to know Chrisina just a little bit off the recording here and made some nice connections about San Diego and some California connections. So I feel already bonded to you. So thanks so much for joining again today, Chrisina. We like to kick off the show learning about our guests, something kind of outside the workplace, a fun fact, hobby, something like that. So would you mind sharing with us a fun fact or surprise about you?
Yeah, absolutely. This was kind of a hard question for me because I'm a pretty open book and a lot of people can search me on the internet to find out a lot. But I don't think many people know that I am the oldest of 8 siblings.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have 7 half siblings from my father's side of the family and 1 half sibling from my mother's side of the family. And I am the oldest, and I am the only one to have been diagnosed with osteogenesis imperfecta, which many people know by brittle bone disease. I tend not to call it that, but since we're in the healthcare sphere today, I will. I've had over 120 fractures and multiple surgeries over my lifetime. I have several rods in different parts of my body and was dependent on Medicaid and SSI for about 24 years of my life.
Wow. When was this something, you mind me asking, you had at birth and did they know?
Yeah. So my mom was 16 when she had me, just barely. My father was 18. And I was born on Camp Pendleton Marine Base in Oceanside, California. And it was through my grandfather's insurance. And when I was born, I had a broken femur. My grandfather, being the strong Marine he was, thought that the doctor who delivered me had broken my femur. And it took months to figure out that it was actually osteogenesis imperfecta, which is not unusual for somebody with that diagnosis to be born with 1 or multiple fractures. And it wasn't until my mother got me onto Medi-Cal 14 months later that I was finally diagnosed through the public hospital system in Oceanside at Tri-City.
Wow, that's a pretty incredible story. I'm familiar with Tri-City Medical Center, obviously Camp Pendleton. For those of you that don't know, that's in the northern San Diego area, Oceanside. Is it technically in Oceanside, or is it like its own little?
It's technically Oceanside.
Okay.
It's Camp Pendleton, and then it always says Oceanside. Like on my birth certificate, it says both.
Okay. Cool. I have a ton of questions. We could probably spend hours with you being open about your situation, but today's purpose is not to talk about that. So tell us, you were born. I'm sure you had many challenges with that diagnosis growing up. Tell us about your childhood and how you kind of fell into having a passion to serve in healthcare or to serve the public.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a visual for everyone, I'm about 3'10" on a good day. I think I've probably shrunk since then, but I use a manual wheelchair, and my son has my disability, osteogenesis imperfecta. We call it OI for short. And my husband is also a little person, but has achondroplasia. We also have had a daughter. Unfortunately, she was born with multiple disabilities and passed away at the very last day of 2016. So she was almost 5 years old. And I share that just because when I'm talking about my upbringing, I firmly believe that my kids have a very different experience than I did. And that's because I did not grow up with a positive disability identity. My family didn't know much about disability. Disability was a bad thing. It was taboo. And it was fascinating because in my family, my mom was a part of a large family as well. And her sister, just 7 months after I was born, had a son with Down syndrome. And so my cousin Larry and I were the first people with visible disabilities, I'll say, to grow up in our family. And while there's definitely non-apparent disabilities in our family, I don't think anybody ever talked about them that way or saw them or would categorize them as disabilities. So in my childhood, having such a bad taste in my mouth about disability, I really tried hard to not identify with that whatsoever. And in fact, throughout my childhood, although I needed a wheelchair from as early as I can remember, if you were in my neighborhood, the likelihood of you seeing me in my wheelchair outside of school, because school required me to use the wheelchair, was pretty uncommon. Where you would see me is sitting flat on a skateboard that fit me perfect from rear end to end of my feet. And I would just push around on the ground and go about my way in the neighborhood or anywhere that my mom was taking me. So it was really throughout that, skateboarding 80s kind of experience that I thought I could fit in and didn't necessarily need to identify as a person with a disability because I had just heard about it being so negative, whether it be in my family, through the medical system, or through the school system. Frankly, I was in segregated education because of my disability until about third grade. And, this was prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but right during the time that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act had finally passed. So 1977, the enforcement came down and it was third grade. I was finally transitioned from segregated school with just kids with all different types of disabilities, where we did a lot of art and we sang songs and did physical therapy and all other types of therapy. And then one day, they said they were going to give me an assessment and they wanted to see if I could read and comprehend some information they presented, and I could. And they basically framed it, and I can vividly remember this. You're 8 years old. I was 9 years old because I was repeating the third grade at the time to go off into public school. But I can remember them making me feel like I was better than my peers, my disabled peers, because I was leaving that school and nobody else was. And I think that was instilled in me until I finally got a break from it in high school because of an amazing opportunity that became available to me simply by accident too, frankly, because I had tried so hard to stay away from disability. Even having a cousin with a disability, it was like, no, I'm not associated to that or anything else related to disability. So it was my sophomore year in high school, randomly, the nurse that I had never met. Again, she's a part of the medical complex. I don't want to do anything with the medical complex, even if it's at school. She came to me at lunch and she said, "Hi, Christina." And I thought, how does this woman even know my name? And she said, "I have this application for youth with disabilities that I really think that you should consider applying for." And I thought, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Here she is in my friend group and we're talking about disability and we never talk about this. Yeah. So she handed me the application, and long story short, I was the first in my family to graduate from high school and go on to college. And so I was in a program called AVID. And in the AVID program, my teacher had found out that I was given this application. And Miss King, my AVID teacher at Vista High School, said to me, "You're going to fill out this application as part of your class assignments," because she knew I wasn't going to do it. And I ended up applying and having a life-changing experience. It was the first time that I had seen positive disabled role models, let alone leaders with disabilities. I was flown up to Sacramento State University for a week for the Youth Leadership Forum for Students with Disabilities, where the program was completely disability-led. That was something that was so foreign to my mind, I had no idea it was possible. I saw that folks with disabilities were driving. My family had never thought I would be able to drive. I learned about disability culture, disability resources, things I could do to help me go to college, disability community, and all these great things. And frankly, Gavin, before that day, I thought I was on my way to being a psychologist, just because of all the things that had happened in our family that I thought I'd probably be a good psychologist. I'm a peer counselor in school, and I seem to do really good in that program. But it was the Youth Leadership Forum that really drove me to go into disability rights and to understand that there's a whole disability community locally, regionally, nationally, and worldwide. And there's these amazing organizations that are oftentimes confused with places that you live called independent living centers.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've probably had other folks on from the independent living movement. And I had heard that the Orange County Independent Living Center, which is the Dale McIntosh Center, was like the Southern California Mecca for the Northern California well-known center that started in Berkeley in the 70s, the Center for Independent Living Berkeley. And, you know, I was graduating from high school. I had decided that I wanted to do disability rights work. I was working in college, going to school at the same time. I was at the Encinitas YMCA, and I saw that a position became available at the Dale McIntosh Center, and I went for it. And I was, I think, in my sophomore year of college at that time, and somehow got the position. I was so excited, and I did that commute, reverse commute, thank goodness, from Oceanside to Catella Street in Orange County in Anaheim for about a year. Yeah. And then just realized that there is so much that young people with disabilities have no idea, let alone older adults and everybody in between. Disability is a lifespan issue, and people have no idea what's out there when it comes to disability.
Wow. I mean, great story, and I really appreciate you opening up. We can probably do a lot of podcasts with you after just the start. So Dale McIntosh, I just learned what an independent living center was probably about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. I've been in healthcare, home care for about 20 years. So even though I was in the industry, the independent living center phrase, I was thinking, oh, that's where older adults who pay privately to live in a community, right? That's what that is, right? No. So can you briefly touch on what is the independent living centers? And then I want you, if you wouldn't mind after that, walk through how you eventually ended up at C4A.
Yeah, absolutely. So independent living centers are in California federally and state funded. And the federal funding comes from the Rehabilitation Act, and the services that all 28 independent living centers in California that cover all 58 counties, similar to the AAAs, the area agencies on aging, there's some territory overlap, but not always. All the independent living centers cover all the counties, but they provide some of what we call core services. One, which I know you've heard before because the AAAs do it. AAAs call it information and assistance. Independent living centers call it information referral. It's a core service. Their services are peer counseling, individual and systems change advocacy, and independent living skills training, as well as transition and diversion. And I know you've talked a little bit about that with my predecessor, Michael Costa. And so I had worked at the Dale McIntosh Center in 99 to 2000, and I saw that an opening came up at the San Diego Independent Living Center, which at that time was called the Access Center, now called Access to Independence. And they had a North County office. And I had applied to be, I believe it was their peer support benefits advocate, and got the position. So it made it much easier for me to continue juggling school and work. I was taking a lot of night classes. I was, in fact, taking some classes at Camp Pendleton, and doing what I could on Saturday classes and first online classes ever. And I had started at Palomar College before CSU San Marcos. So I went on to go to San Diego. And part of what I should explain that makes independent living centers so unique. If there's anything I want you to remember about them, it is that they are required to be run by people with disabilities.
Awesome. Yeah.
Law says that your independent living center must not only be run by people with disabilities, but your board and staff must be 51% minimum people with disabilities. And it could be all of it. It could be mental health, it could be learning disabilities, it could be sensory disabilities, physical disabilities, cognitive, intellectual disabilities, anything. We're talking anything under the sun. So that was one of the things that just really captivated me because, again, as a young person, I didn't see folks with disabilities working ever. I was on SSI benefits. My mom was receiving, at the time we called it AFDC, but welfare, and my SSI check. And I was dependent on the system to get by. My mom raised me with my aunt and my grandmothers. I feel like I was raised by a village of women in my family. And after 7 years at the Access Center, I was recruited to come up to Sacramento as the statewide community organizer for C4A's, what I'll say, sister trade association, the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, CFILC.
Okay.
And so I had been plugged in at that time, nationally, regionally, locally, statewide. And it was a big honor to be able to become the statewide community organizer for the independent living centers. And from that point, when you're in Sacramento, and, I came up here in 2006 and had a couple of really good advocacy years. And I'm so thankful for that because it allowed me to get my wheels wet, so to say. But then during the housing boom and the financial crises of 2008 to 2009, 10, it was a very different Sacramento. So during that time, we were fighting some really significant cuts in Medicaid, and it was an amazing opportunity to get together with other folks that were fighting those cuts as well. And that meant meeting the older adult community and understanding what their needs were and where we intersected and what we were going to do to fight these cuts together. And I can vividly remember IHSS being one of them. Like, there was some substantial cuts during that time, and we're still trying to get back what we lost during the 2009, 2010 days. And it was really from there that I got plugged into a lot of different coalitions in Sacramento. And I think anybody who's ever done community organizing or coalition building knows that you might work with some folks on this topic, but maybe not on another topic because you don't see eye to eye. Yeah. And that's okay. We have a respect for each other when that comes and happens. But over the years, building relationships and continuously working with all of these other diverse organizations that represented marginalized communities and underserved communities, it was becoming very obvious that disability was a part of each one of those communities, whether it was people of color, whether it was low income, whether it was older adults. I mean, you name it. Disability is there. And I don't think we've ever really talked about it in that sense. Because it's something, again, like I learned in the early days of my life, disability is taboo or it's bad and it's something you don't ever want to talk about. So let's not name or talk about the elephant in the room, but disability is a part of everything. Yeah. So it was really exciting to see when, the landscape started changing to really be more inclusive and talk about disability in a way that was more powerful than we'd ever seen previously. And when prior to the pandemic in 2019, I had already been working with C4A fairly closely with their initial executive director, Daryl Kelch. He became a friend of mine. And Daryl and I, by that point in time, I had moved up from statewide organizer to deputy director to executive director. So Daryl and I were really honed in on creating the Aging and Disability Resource Connections in California. And there's sort of a backstory to that as well. But just to say that we saw the importance and the power of older adults and people with disabilities working together. And so when the Newsom administration had introduced the master plan for aging, the disability community was a little taken aback because we certainly wanted to see disability a part of that. And we really thought the landscape was changing to be more inclusive, to really talk about disability more openly, like aging was being talked about during the master plan. And fortunately, I think there were pros and cons to what was happening, but we, on the disability side, were advocating that the plan name change to Aging and Disability Master Plan. And when we saw that wasn't going to happen, we took another stab at it and said, well, if the master plan for aging is all about long-term services and supports, let's name it the LTSS committee, because then it encompasses both of us and it's across all age spans. And that didn't fly either. But what really made a difference, the rubber hit the road when the administration ensured that folks with disabilities, lived experience, people like me and a few others in the room, were appointed to the Master Plan Advisory Committee. So it was that experience in 2019, and then, of course, continuing to work on the master plan throughout the pandemic. I got appointed to the COVID Advisory Committee. We worked tirelessly to ensure that people with disabilities were prioritized for the vaccine as much as older adults were. California was the only state that happened. There's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
I think the master plan for aging really changed a lot of minds and, frankly, hearts around understanding how much more aging and disability has in common than we were willing to talk about previously. And while there's still a ton of work to be done, I was really feeling like I needed a break. I had spent 24 years in nonprofit doing disability rights work, independent living center work. And I thought, if I'm ever going to do something else, I should try to do it now, because I'm in my late 40s. I was in my mid 40s then, and thought, well, let me try something else. And I was recruited to go try healthcare. So I went to go work for Elevance Health in 2022 as CalAIM was being rolled out. And it seemed like a natural thing for me to do because of my personal and professional experience. And, I had heard for years people say, oh, we need more people on the inside to change systems, not just on the outside. And I thought, this is my chance to be one of those people.
Yeah.
I definitely gave it a shot. It was much larger than I ever expected. And I had a lot of learning moments in healthcare. I am so grateful for everything that I learned, because certainly there were things I would have never known had I not had the experience working there. But unfortunately, because of all the things that had happened over the last couple of years and, decreases in employment world, I was one of the people that was let go during the changes to really downsize some of the DE&I and inclusion work. So I was the senior director of the inclusive policy and advocacy team for Elevance Health nationally. And I certainly would never take that experience away, because it was such an aha moment to work with other states and see how area agencies on aging work in those states, how independent living centers work in those states, and how healthcare really partnered with those entities, and how different it could be depending on what state you're in. It looks very different. So once I was laid off, I was like, what am I going to do next? And was doing some consulting work for just a minute, and had always stayed in touch with my aging and disability friends. And when I heard that Michael was retiring, I thought, let me do some informational interviews to see if this is something I want to do, because really I have a personal goal of building that bridge and those gaps between disability and aging that we need to continue to do. So I found myself at C4A in November, but officially started January 2nd. And it's been really exciting to be here and to really help move C4A forward. And stay tuned, because in July, it looks like we're going to try to launch a rebranding, because
Oh,
What my network has really learned is that we're more than aging. We're really the aging and disability network, and that needs to be known.
oh, interesting. I am looking forward to staying tuned, especially with your passion. Okay, awesome. So C4A, I think a lot of our a lot of our audience and guests probably know about the area agencies on aging. Some may not. But C4A, they may not know. So can you tell us about who C4A is, what it stands for, first of all, and the connection to the AAAs?
Yeah, so C4A is the Trade Association for Area Agencies on Aging. We represent 31 of the 33 AAAs across the state that serve the 58 counties. And, each AAA, if you've been to one AAA, you've been to one AAA, because it's really about the services that are needed in your community. And that's how the services get developed. And thankfully, there's some flexibility in the Older Americans Act that allows that to happen.
Awesome. And really quickly, Older Americans Act, let our audience who may not know about it, tell us about that really quickly.
Oh boy. So this year marks the 60th anniversary of the Older Americans Act. It's a very, very big deal. In fact, our national trade association, U.S. Aging, had worked tirelessly over the last several years to get the Older Americans Act reauthorized and really make it more modern so that services and programs could fit more into what folks' needs are today, and also take into account the incredible increase of older adults that, are continuing to live longer. And when those older adults live longer, the chances of them becoming disabled are higher. And so while older adults might not like to refer to themselves as disabled, they might want to call it something else. It is disability. And so C4A is very proud to represent the area agencies on aging. And a number of them are also Aging and Disability Resource Connections, ADRCs. So very exciting. And I'm happy to plug anybody in whenever they contact us to the local resources available to them.
Awesome. So majority of the state you guys are advocating for. Maybe in like 1 to 2 minutes, could you tell us maybe some of the past wins of the C4A and or I know you just started in January, but maybe some of the initiatives you guys have for this year too.
Yeah, so I think one of the big ones that folks always are talking about is expanding and increasing funding for nutrition services. Nutrition continues to be a big issue, ensuring that older adults have access to food. And that can be in a lot of different ways, but that continues to be one of the major issues right next to any type of caregiving needs and resources and support. So all the AAAs do have different type of nutrition programs, as well as caregiving support programs, as well as legal assistance, information assistance. Again, though, based on your local area needs, the services might look a little different or might be executed a little different.
Well, that makes sense. Okay. And then they're not always well, I think there's at least one county that doesn't call itself a AAA, right?
Yeah, there's a few.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, so my board chair happens to be from Santa Clara County, and she is the CEO of SourceWise. And SourceWise is what I define as sort of a mega area agencies on aging. And SourceWide provides not only the services required under the Older Americans Act and the California Older Americans Act, it also oversees the paratransit program. It oversees the in-home support services program. It's a unicorn because it's also a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so some of the AAAs are nonprofit, some of them are joint powers of attorney, and some of them are embedded in their county system. And that's very new to me. So I continue to learn from my members because I don't know the systems well enough yet.
Okay, so you talked about your board chair, who is the CEO for SourceWise. Who else is on your leadership team or support team?
So I am so fortunate. Again, because I worked with C4A in my previous role at CFILC, I had relationships with some of the members here. Paul Dunaway, who is a part of a county AAA system in Sonoma, he is my vice chair. I have a wonderful treasurer, Sarah Enns from Imperial County, which is near and dear to my heart because the Access Center served Imperial County. We had a satellite office there. And then I have Maggie Kraft, who's from another nonprofit in the far north. She's from PSA, Area Agency on Aging 1.
Okay.
They all go by a number, and we usually call them the PSA. I know you're going to ask me what that stands for, and I'm not going to be able to tell you at this very moment. But
Public service area? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Because I'm so used to saying AAAs now.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, sounds like you got some great support. Forgive me, you didn't name the CEO of SourceWise, so I'll put you on the spot here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Annalisa Del Pinal. She's amazing.
Thank you. I've had the chance to interact with her a couple times. She's always been so kind and gracious. So I wanted to make sure we get her name plugged in there.
Yeah, I could not have asked for a better board chair coming in. I've learned so much from her, and we're just a really good team.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know she's definitely a pillar in the aging community and as a SourceWise. So good shout out that you gave there. So your conference, which historically has been not too far from March, like May area. I know this year it's going to be in the fall. So tell us about your upcoming C4A conference.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to be down in Anaheim, November 5th through the 7th. And we're doing a few things before that as well. So for folks that don't know, C4A is one full-time staff member. That's myself and my lovely and amazing executive assistant, Angela Anthony. We are C4A staff. So we depend a lot on our members to be incredibly active to help us execute things that they want to prioritize. So one of those things is disaster preparedness and recovery. And because of the LA fires, it was yet another reason to elevate the topic of preparedness and recovery. And we're going to be putting on a public, specifically a webinar for the Older Adults and People with Disabilities Network to learn more about how systems like California Office of Emergency Services, the Red Cross, and Department of Social Services, how all of these entities and these structures work together to ensure that older adults and people with disabilities get their needs met, both on the front end in planning as well as in the recovery stages as well.
That's awesome. Cool. So I want to shift. So the November conference, I think last year was in San Jose, right? This year, Orange County?
Yep, Anaheim. Anaheim at the Hyatt Regency on Harbor Boulevard.
All right. And it was November 5th through 7th. Yes. Is it too early for folks to register? I'm guessing.
To register, yes. We do have a save the date out, and we will be opening our website soon, but we are just now for the first time ever contracting with a meeting planner to help us execute all things related to the conference.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. I'm glad you have some help for that.
Yeah.
So, if people want to stay up to speed and learn more about it as it comes, is it your website? And what is that website for folks to kind of keep checking for more information?
Yes, great question. It's c4a.info. So it's www. The letter C, the number 4, the letter A, .info, INFO. You can also check out our social media. Unfortunately, our handles are a little bit different on each platform, but LinkedIn, Facebook, and X all have our save the dates out now. And we always are putting information up there on what we're up to or what we're offering to the community, as well as organizations to join.
Sounds good. I've seen you on LinkedIn a little bit, Christina. So is it okay if we throw that out there for folks to follow you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, and I absolutely, that's an easy one because I always usually share anything that we're putting up for C4A. So my LinkedIn is just my name, Chrisina Mills, and you're welcome to follow me and keep track of what I'm doing, what C4A is doing. And of course, I have the C4A conference information up there. I'm going to be presenting next week at the Meals on Wheels conference in Sacramento. I presented last week to the California Senior Legislature, doing a lot of really great, cool stuff. And, if anybody wants to plug in, and I have a blog that I've started. It's a personal blog, but it's really in hopes to, again, build that bridge between aging and disability. And it's on my LinkedIn page, and I'm trying to make sure I do at least one blog a month on the intersection topics of disability and aging.
Yeah, I've seen that blog as well. So good shout out there, Christina. This has been great. Hearing your story, getting to C4A. I know there's probably a lot more you can share, but for time purposes, probably can't go too much longer today. But I do want to give you the opportunity, Christina, before we wrap up, if there's anything else that we missed, giving you the opportunity to talk about with C4A, I want to give you that opportunity.
I would just like to say that it's important that we continue to make sure that we're all working, and C4A is dedicated to working to ensure that the master plan for aging is truly implemented and does all that it was intended to do, and that we're creating a state where folks who are aging and aging into disability, and those like me that are disabled and aging, really have the supports and services needed to live our best life.
Well said. And you mentioned the master plan a few times throughout today's episode. Folks, if you don't know what that is, of course, a Google search will always get you a lot of resources. But there's also a podcast episode we did a few years back with Kim McCoy-Wade, who I believe was appointed by Governor Newsom in her role at the time to help really drive that forward. So that'll give you kind of a general overview if you just want to listen about it. But again, I'm sure quick Google search will work as well. Christina, thank you so much. I did not know much about you today, and hearing your story, I'm sure not just inspired me, but a lot of folks. I look forward to seeing you in person in November, if not sooner. And again, folks, c4a.info is the website to follow Christina's organization. And I really encourage you guys. I've attended the conference. It is fantastic, whether you're an attendee or an exhibitor. I'm sure you guys are looking for exhibitors as well. So I'm going to help you out there.
Thank you.
I encourage you guys, if you're in the aging services in California, to consider exhibiting as well. I think if I recall, is not too costly, and you can attend, I think, some of the sessions depending on your exhibit level. So check it out. I really encourage it. I will plan to be there, especially because it's a short drive. I mean, that makes it nice.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. I appreciate that. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in person.
Likewise, Christina. Thank you so much again for joining. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you have and want to check out other episodes, visit us at pophealthpodcast.com, iTunes or Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, and now YouTube as well. Take care.